launch into it.
So, as I was saying, I kind of had a hard time readjusting to like daily life after a retreat. And there was some fatigue, and I was kind of just not getting back into the swing of things very well. But that has since resolved somewhat, and I'm back to practicing the way I used to before. I had kind of a hard time last week where I didn't miss any sessions, but I cut them short. I only did like 20, 30 minutes on some days. And now I'm back to what I want to be doing, and I also feel better. So I think it was just a matter of needing some time to get back into it.
Mm-hmm. First off, that's actually quite normal that you went to a meditation system that you said was metta, I believe, a metta meditation class. You haven't actually explained what happened in that class, and we'll save that for later. Uh, but it really wouldn't matter what kind of retreat that you were in. If you actually slow down and everything gets calm, that you're watching what you're doing, that you're watching what you're feeling, that you're uh, doing a whole lot of sitting and not much else. And then all of a sudden, you've got back to the normal world that you were in, that it took you 3, 4, 5 days to get out of your system when you went into retreat. And now you're surprised that it's hard to get retreat out of your system to get back to where you were. And I imagine that
Yeah.
that would take a few days, but not too much.
Yeah, it's been about a week, and I feel like I'm back to normal now. So, but yeah, I mean, coming back, I guess what I learned from that is not to go pretty much straight back into work. Like, that is a definite lesson that for my next retreat, I want to have at least like 2, 3 days maybe where I can just kind of come out of it without having to work again.
Uh-huh.
Um, and this time I only had like 1.5 days, so basically just driving back and then one day and then back to work. And I don't
Uh-huh.
think that was the best idea.
Uh-huh. One of the things that I just noticed was is that you use the word work at least 3 times, and that you changed the definitions as you went along. One was work in the sense of going to a place of business. The second one is work in the sense of working your way out of being a meditator into being a worker. And then back to the third was going back to the concept of it being a place to go to work. Now, one of the things that I would say about having a place to go to work and working yourself up to wanting to go to such a place, get used to that, because someday you're going to start asking your questions about what can my life be like so that I don't have to go
Yeah.
to work.
I've been at that place for some time now. I'm there.
I do remember even when I worked for IBM, my first real professional job as an engineer, about 21. I do remember then, and because we had a territory that was large, so that some of my customers were 30 miles apart from each other. Now, this wasn't out in the wilderness. This was South Carolina. What was wilderness was computers. And on these long drives, I remember musing, how much money do I have to get together in my pocket before I can say goodbye to all of this? And I had just gotten into it. I had been asking really strange questions for a long time, practicing judo out of a book in South Carolina where it was really hard to find any books on judo or anything else. The first Buddhist book I read was when I was 14 about the light of Asia, which really, really confused me because it's so magically oriented. It's Christopher Humphrey's. It goes way back, and it's, in fact, because that book became so popular, that was what magicalized Buddhism for the West. That Buddhism, in a sense, is not nearly as magical, especially in Thailand. A lot of it have, uh, uh, especially around Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, they take the magic right out.
I appreciate that.
All right. Now, one of the things about that situation then is when you start coming out of the magical world, you realize that business is part of that magical world. And one of the lies that they've told you is that you need us in order to survive. Not only do you need to buy the things you need from us, you have to work for us in order to buy the things you need from us. And when
Yeah.
you start putting that together, you start saying, why do I want to live in that kind of world? Or what
Yeah.
kind of world would I prefer to live in?
Yeah. I was actually talking to, let's say, a Dharma friend a couple of days ago about this.
Uh-huh.
So he's
Now, how did I know that? Go ahead.
there's no hiding anything from you, I think. It all comes out. Even though I didn't even plan talking about this because yeah, it wasn't on my mind specifically today, but it's been on my mind for the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
So you have good intuition, I think. So anyway, I was talking to this guy. He's in my
Oh,
locals.
that's because I know about mind. You see, I've got one I've been playing with for years.
Yeah. Also, I imagine I'm not the only one dealing with this conundrum of orienting yourself towards, let's say, the Dhamma, and also having to work a lot. I think that's pretty much a common experience. At least I've heard it from many different people where they would actually prefer to spend more time on the Dhamma and also maybe more time doing helping other people. But it's not that easy. And
Well, it actually comes with opening one's heart, which is why you went to the meditation thingy anyway.
yeah, so anyway, what I like the kind of conundrum that I think that's there is at least here in Germany, it's pretty difficult to reduce your hours. So you're basically in a lot of professions you're forced to just work full time, which is like 40 hours plus. And reducing your hours is pretty difficult. It's usually just like people who have kids who get to do that. And that would kind of be my preferred mode, to just like maybe reduce it down, do some more Dhamma stuff, and then see where that goes.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay. I did that actually by taking a teacher's profession. That I took a great reduction in salary and started working at Detroit Institute of Technology as a computer science teacher, simply so I could take really large blocks of time. But what happened instead was that I got also into the contracting world, and after that, I've rarely had a job. I've always taken contracts. And sometimes it goes years and years and years between contracts. And in fact, it's also an interesting story like that. Let me see if I can remember his name. I think it was his name was Walt or something, and the word Scott comes, but I'm not sure that his last name was Scott. Well, we'll just stay with Walter. Walter had been a Benedictine priest in his youth, and now he was management, but he was management almost in the sense of being a political appointee.
Hmm.
And he was the guy that interviewed me. And when he, they always want to know, well, where have you been and what have you been doing for the past number of years, 5 or more years? The answer was, I've been a monk in Thailand. And that really clicked with him because he knew what was going on and he wanted to hire me just like that. Because he knew that I would be the star of the show, and that's exactly what happened. In the sense of helping all of the other not students, all of the new employees as they were staffing up, how to understand the work that needed to be done through IDMS, because I'd already had that. So I'd had an old system in the background. But never mind, the point is that the other way of looking at it, you're looking at it in the sense of reducing hours in a steady state. And I'm looking at it from the sense of on again, off again, with the emphasis upon off again.
Yeah. I guess that has come to mind. And there's definitely worthwhile things that I could do with that time. So I kind of have ideas of what I would like to be doing, but it's a pretty radical step that I think should not be taken lightly to make like
Well,
these big decisions.
it really would be nicely if you could do it lightly, but in fact, you're doing it with great trepidation, and I'll do the best I can to push you along as you trepidate your way through this process.
I
And
guess
not
I
only
guess
that, but let me get this in right now. This is a human condition. I know this from psychology, and that I can show you evidence in every religion. Every young man goes through this. What ladder am I going to climb? The ladder of the money or the ladder of my own choosing? And so many of them get stuck on the ladder of money and longing to go to the other one. The way to do it is to fix it up so that you can go live the life you want to live for as long as you can, and then go back and do the best you can at getting a job, getting some more money, and then coming back again. And by doing so once or twice, you'll probably find ways of lengthening the time all the way to the point of your retirement. We're only talking about 40 years of doing this kind of stuff. In fact, the way
yeah.
that I would talk about it is that I retired 4 times unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
But those retirements can last for years. And if the German market is going to remain the way that it is now, then it'll be easy enough for you to get a job when you come back from Germany 5 years from now, broke and destitute, but some buddy or friend of yours gave you a plane ticket back to Germany.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is
and that's
from
and that's only the worst thing can out. I mean, that's like the bottom of the barrel kind of picture that I painted.
yeah, the way
Surely,
I
if you
tend to
plan
think
better,
about it,
you'll plan better than that.
yeah. Um, the way I'm thinking about it is if you come at it from a very mundane perspective, so a very non-Dhamma perspective, say the perspective my family might have on it, um, you know, uh, dropping your job to go do some weird stuff in some weird country is not well advised. And
Are they Christian at all? Do they have any
yeah,
Christian
yeah,
roots?
yeah,
Then ask him, what would Jesus do? Because he just did that. I mean, that's the whole point of his life.
yeah. That's a,
He didn't
that's
stay a
actually true.
carpenter. He did not stay a carpenter. He became something different than that. And along the way, he found a lot of wisdom. Who or what or why about the crucifixion is irrelevant in all regards. But what is relevant is the kinds of things that he said that indicated that he knew the Dhamma. Where did he find that stuff? Real good example is Luke 17, where he says to the Pharisees who are overhearing him right after he says, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of God." And they ask him then about the kingdom of heaven, or when is it coming? You know, because by then everybody had the idea of some Messiah coming in the end of the earth and blah, 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 blah. And Jesus says nobody will ever know that kind of stuff. And besides, you're looking in the wrong place. The place to find the kingdom of God is within. This is Luke 17.
Hmm.
But that's not the only thing. I mean, it just goes on and on about the fox in the fields have a hold, but the son of the man has no place to rest. So I tell you what, if they're Christian, you've got them. Ding dang, you've got them. You've got an exact way of explaining what you're going through. But you're not the only one that does that. That's in fact part of the awakening is to recognize that the society that we live in is only at best mundane right view, and it's filled with suffering. And the suffering is part of the suffering is that job, even if you like it.
Yeah, not that much. I mean, I don't hate it, but I'm not attached to it in that way.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I kind of periodically get these thoughts that this phrase pops into my head, and it's practice like your head is on fire. And there's, I don't know if that's from the Buddha or I don't know who said that, but it
It's
resonates
in
with me.
it's in the sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya for sure. It's there.
And Tanisaro Bhikkhu talks a lot about contemplating death, where you don't know how much time you've got. And there's no security in thinking that I can keep doing this job for 5 years and then like think about this again. I might not be able to do that. So whenever that thought comes, I feel like a very great sense of urgency that I need to not get trapped again in, like the just the kind of daily routine where you stop thinking about that, because it kind of rattles me up in the sense that,
Mhm.
damn, this is important. I shouldn't forget about this. And
Exactly.
then other stuff tends to come up and push that aside. And then I tend to think, okay, let's not go crazy. Let's not do something you would regret, and make irreversible decisions. So it's kind of it switches between both of those.
Okay. In one way or another, as I've said, in a way, those those bridges are rebuildable, sometimes with serendipity. Like with Walter. That was serendipitous because he had been a monk, he knew what one was. Anybody else said, if he had never been a monk, then he would have looked at me in my suit and coming back into the Western world, and he was thinking, you've probably forgotten everything you know. What good are you going to be here that your experience is really old? And who gave you permission to trot away from our universe of being good computer people? All right, so you can see in that regard, it would be a hill to climb. But in the other regard, because he had been a monk, he knew what that was, possibly in a way that I couldn't describe and you wouldn't understand until you've been there and done that. But there is a quality about it takes one to know one. And part of that, by the way, is that very thing that you're talking about right now, or that we're talking together about, and that is that do you have the strength of one who has right view to walk away from that which you know is not going to bring you what you want?
Yeah. Do you know the term cognitive dissonance?
Boy, do I ever. There it goes
Yeah.
again.
I think that's I'm having a lot of that because as time goes by, I'm just becoming more and more sure that this Dhamma thing is the way to go. That it's not just like a hobby or a way to work on my neuroses or something, but that it's much deeper and that it's
Hey, even at, and forgive me for saying that, but even at that level, it's really, really worthwhile. All right. Now, there is a stage in the practice where the Buddha talks about the character of one who has right view. Do you have the character of one who has right view? Means that, well, by this time, he's probably already a monk. Uh, but even in that, many, even those who it is said become Sotapan because of one statement that the Buddha has made. It comes from a different direction, and it's coming from the issue of dedication, that the dedication is now so strong that it guarantees these necessary steps. But the way that I'm teaching is I give you these necessary steps and start watching you plot upon them. And so I know that these are the things that are going, and in fact, stuff is laid out exactly in the 16 stages of insight that the Mahasi has, especially around those steps from 4 to 8, where we wind up being kind of disgusted with the world and we want to get away from it.
yeah.
And we also want to get away from what's left of that disgusting world that we still carry around mentally in the sense of the past and the future. And going back to Tanisaro is what you were saying, this sutta that he is referencing that has that distinct um, co commingling with keeping the mind out of the past and out of the future is by the way is Majjhima Nikaya number 131. And the Bhikkhu Bodhi tries to keep it as poetic as he can. But the real intention is not about a description of Mara and his host, but rather just see that as, hey, there's a lot of ways to die. There's a lot of ways to die. So when Mara, which is the impersonation or the personification of death itself, the actual your death is just one of the hosts that's going to come get you. And who knows when that's going to come.
Yeah.
And so why waste our time? It's best to be in the present, to be here now.
Yeah.
And so this also this whole thing that the Buddha could see was because he went through it. Young men do it. You know this. It's part of the society. That this is something that many, many men kind of come to say it's not hard rebellion like rebel without a cause or someone who has an authority figure problem or authority identification issues where we're rebelling in the sense of me in a tight way. Rather, what's going on with you is that me that is being controlled by society is starting to melt away so that you're beginning to see that society really doesn't have the control over you that you've been giving it since childhood.
Yeah. The way I'm thinking about this is not so much in terms of control, but in terms of maybe purpose, where I can see pretty clearly that if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm wasting my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't want to waste my time. But it's also, I feel like it takes something, maybe courage, to really go that step and deal with the consequences of that, and really go do it. And
Hence the lion.
Yeah.
And I need not reference the Wizard of Oz and the courage of the lion. They're connected. It's been historically connected forever. The fearlessness of a lion. That's why the Buddha is recognized as a lion. It's because nobody can ruffle his feathers. But that takes a lot of courage. In fact, in politics, someone who does that would probably get killed. And that might be exactly what happened to Jesus. And you can see that there's a long history of really courageous lions, lion-hearted people who are there to do the right thing, possibly being situational. But let me give you a few examples. One with my favorite example is Socrates and the hemlock issue. Do you know why he was forced to take hemlock? It was because he was teaching the youth of Athens to not join the army. That was the real issue. Never mind that he had filled his house with gullible young philosophers. And so when he died, all of his students were there. One of the he wouldn't allow his family because he knew they would be hysterical, and he wanted to be hysterical with laughter, not in tears. So he wouldn't let his family in. And when one of the students started crying, he kicked him out. So only those students who were stoic enough to enjoy his death with him. All right. But the real issue is that he was a lion. He would not shut up. He would not exile. And history is littered with these kind of guys. Jesus was one of them. He just wouldn't shut up. He was a lion. I don't know about the Son of God in the sense of being very magical, but he can be a Son of God, and that's the lion. That lion-hearted, that strength. And so, in fact, that's the question is that do you have that longing to find out who you really are inside? Do you have what it takes to develop the skills to be able to see who you are? Mindfulness and the big four. Right view, right sati, right effort. That's the one that we have to start with. That brings on right attitude. If you're willing to put in the effort, then you've got the attitude. So maybe those two things work hand in hand, that if you get the attitude, you'll work up with the effort that it takes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing this in small things in daily life as well, where um, I see that my behavior isn't really congruent with what I believe, my belief system, basically, because on the list of priorities for me, on an intellectual level, the Dharma is pretty far up there. But it's pretty easy to be lazy and to not actually do the things that are necessary every day to put that into practice. So it's much easier to say, I won't do my practice session now. I'll do it tomorrow, or whatever that is. And I see these little instances where there's just laziness, and then I kind of end up regretting it after the fact.
Actually, that laziness that you mentioned is exactly one of the hindrances. It's the third listed under the label of sloth and torpor in English, though those two words are never used. But don't care attitude or lazy is that's just a hindrance. I couldn't bother. I don't have the effort. I don't have the energy. No right effort there. And when we can see that in the mind, maybe we can kick that lazy, I don't care out and say, never mind, start again. Take a deep breath. More than likely, when we're in that state, the breathing has gotten so shallow that the mind is being starved of oxygen, and so it feels lazy, almost in the sense of feeling sick. Starved of oxygen because we're not doing anything. That's why that coming back to that deep breath is so valuable in keeping the attention awake, making sure that the brain is oxygenated, that it's got the stuff it needs to do the stuff it needs.
Yeah, I've been going about this in my own small way, where I previously was hesitant to do a second session in the day. So I've been pretty good about doing a session in the morning after waking up before going to work. And I've had that habit going pretty well, but I was averse to doing another session in the afternoon or in the evening, because I would typically be pretty tired after work, because my work days are really long and not that enjoyable. And then I kind of come home and I'm like annoyed and tired and drained and kind of just want to, like, basically what I want to do is eat pizza and watch TV. Mm-hmm. Typically, and that's like full on laziness. Like, I don't want to notice anything. I don't want to think. I don't want to discern. I just want to kind of numb myself, basically. And so I've been really prioritizing sitting in the evening, even though I know I'll be tired, and to just work with the tiredness and the dullness. and to kind of accept that it's going to be there and kind of work on it and hoping that it will get better over time.
All right. Um, this brings me to, first off, let's address that one little thing and then back up from there. If that's the case, then the right time to meditate is just when you do get home in your worst, most tired, most lazy moment. That's the time to sit down and use your meditation to rejuvenate yourself so that you really know how to watch TV and enjoy a pizza.
Yeah, it still tends to have the, like, meditating still has the effect that it is effortful. So I'm usually, it takes some mental energy to actually do the things that I need to do, and
Part of
it's not as much relaxing as it is actually more of a, I mean, it is relaxing in a certain sense, but it's also work in the sense that I have to apply effort.
All right. I would say like this, that very beginning students, it's better for them to meditate in the morning when they wake up because they've got more energy and more effort to do so. That over the time of the day, the mind gets tired unless you know how to rejuvenate the mind. And there's many ways to do that. One of the ways to do that it was done by John F. Kennedy, president who got assassinated in November 1962, and that he would sit with one of his shoes off, holding the bottom heel of the shoe with one finger, and let it dangle down, and let himself go to sleep until the shoe dropped. All right, when he would go, and that would be enough to rejuvenate him. That's the method that he used. We've got better techniques than that. But so long as you see the meditation is putting in more effort than you're getting out of it, we need to change your attitude just a little bit. But I think that you can still do this, that you're already better or ready to do it in the middle of the evening after you come home. While there's that desire to sit and eat pizza, this is the time to say, never mind, let's go to the gym of the mind. Let's do a little bit of workout.
Yeah.
All right. And this workout is going to take two ingredients. One is going to take some breathing. To really let yourself breathe. Every time the mind wanders away, come back and take 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 deep breaths. Long, slow. Not panting like you need air, but the out breath should be like a sigh. Long, slow, relaxing, end of day out breath. Because it's the end of your day. And so the example that I give, besides you being what you're doing right now, is imagine that it gets evening time and the sun goes down and it's not so hot, and then the bell rings, and so now the slave can put down his sack of cotton. The day's done. And the first thing he does is he sits down either on that cotton or on the ground beside the cotton, and he relaxes for a moment. Right? That's what you need to do. In fact, we need to get you that bell, and we'll get into this in just a moment. Um, so let's finish off with this idea that we need to start using that sitting meditation as a point of rejuvenation, not as an extra effort that you're going to get some benefit from sometime in the future.
Yeah, I guess an aspect of that is that typically I'm still dealing with dullness in meditation. So typically, as my concentration increases, I fall into dullness more. And the way Chuladasa advises to deal with that is to use a physical antidote to the dullness. So, for example, breathing very deep a couple of times, tensing the muscles to kind of wake yourself up, then releasing again. Do something physical that kind of rattles you up. And
rub your arms, stand up, walk around, splash water on your face. All of these are actually in one of the suttas.
yeah, and so I've been doing that, and yeah, it's kind of I'm already dull and tired, and then sitting
That's why
just
the
typically
breathing. Exactly.
It quickly leads into just kind of nodding off or kind of very low mental energy. And then I have to use the antidotes, which are pretty unpleasant, to be honest. Like, meditating standing up for a pretty long time is not that pleasant. I would rather not do it, to be honest. But I kind of, like, I bear it because I know it's good for me.
Not
and I know
with that
that's not the right
attitude.
attitude. Yeah.
No, but if you have the right attitude, is that you can bear up to it because you're a lion and you're proud that you can stand at attention. That you're a worthy one. You can do that. It really is a change of attitude that's so important. I'm kind of hesitant to bring it up, but since you did bringing up Chuladasa, I confess that I managed to read a little bit. Okay. I read enough to understand what his 10-point path was, where it was, how it fit together, the language that he used, and where it fits in the overall scheme of things. So this was all I got out of it.
You're
No
saying
big
that like
details.
you're saying like that's not a lot. I don't think I've managed that. So
All right. And so let me help you do it like this. First off, I want to introduce that the way that I teach and the way that Chuladasa teaches, there's two major differences. And that if you're aware of them, then you can manage both. Because even though it's like two boats, and you've got one foot in one boat and one foot in the other boat, or even worse, that you're on two horses, one foot on one horse and one foot on the other horse, unless you've got really strong thighs, those horses are going to separate, and so are you. So, or the boats. In any case, the two major distinctions are that the path that he is teaching is a step by step sequence of events. You do this and you get good at it, and then you do this, and then you get good at it, and there may be some future kind of build up in the forward direction in the sense that what I'm doing now may get me ready to be able to do what comes next. And for some students, it's going to take 7 years to go through the 10 steps, etc., like that. Huh? The way that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa teaches, and the way that I came to understand how to teach, is what we call the natural method. Okay? The natural method, one of the natural methods, for instance, of learning how to swim is throw the kid in the water and see if he survives. If he survives, he learned how to swim naturally. They do it, unless they become too afraid. So you got to catch the kid at the right moment and throw the kid in, and he can just start swimming. There he is. There's an issue of the survival rate that keeps that from being normal practice for swimming. Because not enough kids are able, they need some instruction and a few things. But very soon after a bit of instruction, the right thing to do is throw them in the water and let them swim. And yet, in our educational system in the West, because we want to herd the kids along, all the 6-year-olds and all the 7-year-olds separated and all the 8-year-olds separated, etc., like that, we might even separate the boys and the girls because it's easier to control them when they're separated, so the teachers think. Everything just goes down like this and stays at a low tension. But the point is that that's what gives rise to grades. First grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Okay, so in that kind of sense, that's the way that the Tuladasa method is done. All right. What's wrong with teaching a bit of geometry to a kid who doesn't even know the numbers? About the relationship between, for instance, a triangle and a circle, and how integrally they related are in the sense of angles, etc., like that, which is why sine and cosine are so codependent upon the number pi. And you can show that to a child without ever using any of the technical language. They can understand it, all right? So it has to do with the way that we teach things, and that you've gotten stuck in that model. And recognize that I don't teach that model. I teach the natural method. And I think the natural method was also done by the Buddha, and that he developed that method from the organized method that he was already doing. And the way that it's that you could incorporate that organization is the concept of the jhanas, of teaching the first jhana and then the second jhana and then the third jhana and then the fourth jhana, without recognizing that the third, especially the third and the fourth jhana, are interrelated in a way that has to do with the sensations of the body, how focused the mind is. But never mind that. The point is that things get all messed together, all fluid and everything. And during your life, even during your meditation retreat, you're going to have to deal with all kinds of things. You cannot separate it and do this and then that and then this and then that. And by the way, that's one of the really big places where we find issues, and that the biggest example of this would be Goenka. Though Chuladasa's, the thing that I read was not, by the way, Chuladasa, but it was on the website from the guy who likes Chuladasa a lot. All right, and he actually mentioned about the body scanning at one point in there, so that I know that they're familiar with the Goenka system. All right. But one of the biggest problems that we have had, and Westerners are susceptible to this by doing things like ruining their knees or making it difficult to walk because they're practicing wrongly, with the expectation that Anapanasati needs to be practiced step 1, 2, 3, 4. Step 1, 2, 3, 4 is in breath and out breath long, in and breath out breath short is 2. Scanning the body or examining the body is step 3. And then tranquilizing the body is step 4. Well, tranquilizing the body requires tranquilizing the mind, so there's an issue with sequence. That the way that Anapanasati is set up in a framework that is natural. It's not set up in a framework of sequence of events. Or graded. And because of that, the Western mind gets really confused because we think in gradations rather than let's mix this stew together.
Yeah, that's actually the impression I had, because I read like maybe the first half of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's Mindfulness with Breathing book,
Uh-huh.
where he goes over the beginning steps of Anapanasati. And
Mm-hmm.
I had the impression that it was pretty similar to where the first thing he prescribes is getting your concentration to a place where you can follow the breath in and out all the time without losing it, and then work with the long breath, then work with the short breath. And it seems like this sequence where you do the first you have to master this skill, like not lose the breath, don't get distracted. Then you do another thing, like breathe long and keep the breath long, and then once you've mastered that, move on to the next thing. That's what it sounded like to me, but you're saying that's not correct?
That's actually not correct in the best way of saying it. All three of those things are good to work on, but it's not necessary that you work on them in a particular sequence, each one for a long period of time. That within 1 hour of sitting practice, you can practice all of those things. You've got time to do this. And we've got a lot of stuff on our plate. So that's the first issue is that we're practicing the natural method. Here's another example of the natural versus the organized method. One of the things, by the way, there are 2 articles, and that is Insight by the Natural Method and Insight by the Organized Method. These are 2 different works that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has. They're both on the web. If you have trouble getting them, I'll send it to you. But you should be able to just Google those words and to come right up. So the problem with the organized method is eventually whatever we need to do, we do too much of it before we move on to the next step because we still have doubt. And that issue doesn't happen with the natural method. We just throw everything in there and everything's grits for the mill. And it all gets ground equally. All right, so that's the first thing. And so the way that I would say that we could apply this means is that you need to start looking at especially steps 7, 8, and 9, and do that. That if you can get those things done, at least sufficiently, then you can go back and do some of the other steps that you're not finished with yet and have some new skills in doing it. And one of the skills to have is this skill about joy, because you're not giving yourself enough joy. That's why I said about having a meditation session that is refreshing. In order to have a meditation session that's refreshing, you've got to be up there at 7, 8, or 9, something like that in Chuladasa's list.
Oh, I thought you were referring to step 7, 8, 9 of the Anapanasati.
No, 7, 8, and 9 of Anapanasati. No, actually not. No, of Chuladasa's list. Sorry about that.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's go to step 2. Now that we've understood the first issue is the natural versus the organized method. And that you can work with this natural method and still work with Chuladasa's work. But the only thing is that you take your attitude of a rigid step by step, almost like a ladder going from the ground floor up to the second floor. And instead, seeing it as a whole bunch of small, different colored bean balls. And the more multicolored, and by the way, there's 10 different colors. Let's not give a list of colors. But the more of these bean balls you get, then the more you can stand up on them so that you can get up to the second floor. So that each step that is on your ladder becomes much smaller and less important, but also more frequent.
Yeah. It to put it in another word, it's to do with being goal oriented, right? So
Boy, you got it. Exactly so.
yeah, I feel like that's the major drawback of Chuladasa's system, that in the way that it's like inherently, in the way that it's set up, the way he talks about the stages, it's just inherent that it leads to goal oriented thinking, I think. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure if I'm especially prone to that, or if it's pretty universal that everyone struggles with this in that way. But yeah, I keep, I mean, attitude wise, I have been focusing a lot on joy and really coming back. Like, I keep remembering how important it is. And so the way I've been doing it is to kind of come, like, every time the mind wanders, come back joyfully. That's been my intention. And to
Excellent.
not so much focus on, am I improving in terms of the stages, but am I meeting the goal of, can I do it joyfully and not in like a gritting my teeth manner. So
Exactly so.
that's been the
So
focus.
now, all right. So now we're beginning to see that the when I said the beginner would practice in the morning and the skilled would practice in the evening. Another way of saying is that the timid one or the victim practices in the morning because he wants to make it easy for himself, and the lion wants to do it in the evening because he can do that kind of stuff. In fact, I was having a conversation with my daughter that wound up with us doing a Google image search on gorillas. And that was quite delightful to see all of that with her. Uh, but I was teaching her a lesson about crying and acting like a gorilla to get her way, but I was using it in a negative sense. But recently, she brought me her cell phone showing that she had found gorillas on YouTube. So, if lion doesn't suit, then be a gorilla. Beat your chest and say, I can handle you, you little pipsqueak of a hard day at work. So that's part of the attitude change that's really, really valuable so that you actually can, while you're doing this, you have possibly the intention of making this a relaxing, stress free, rejuvenating sitting so that when you finish the sitting, you feel vibrant and healthy and ah,
Yeah, sounds like a good intention. I've definitely been focusing on the relaxing a lot, and
mhm.
I've actually found out that I've been really over efforting in directing attention. So I've kind of been trying to force attention to do something where it would be more appropriate to kind of gently intend to do it and then kind of let it happen on its own. So I've been using I've not been using right effort in that way. So the effort was not correct. Um,
Sometimes it really is effort. Sometimes right effort actually is effort.
yeah, the I've
Sometimes it doesn't move out with a gentle budge. Sometimes you have to grab that that noisy bar fly by the nape of the neck and throw him out of your bar. You have to become sometimes a bar attendant or a bouncer.
yeah I've found that it works um, better for me if I adopt an attitude of doing as little as necessary to kind of start out with some very, very gentle things and then try that for a while and see if it works. And usually it does. And then when I find that it doesn't work, do more. But previously I was like, how much can I do? And let's do even more than that. So more of a over-efforting. Yeah.
Right. Especially effort without an immediate goal. The bar bouncer issue that I gave was not that the bar bouncer is constantly throwing people out just because that's his new invented job in his own mind, but he only throws those out that needs to be thrown out. So right effort also has the wisdom of knowing what's the right thing to do, and the right thing to do can be easily understood to be here now. That simple little phrase that in Pali is ta ta ta. And there's nothing to do with ta 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 other than taking a deep breath and enjoying it. And so that deep breath that you were talking about is the first thing that we do rather than the third or whatever. All right, so now let's get into the second issue with Chuladasa, and the issue is the distinction between the way he teaches and what he teaches, which is it's significantly. I'm going to use the word controversial. The first one was easy to explain. Everybody can kind of go along with it. The second thing that I'm about to talk about can be seen as controversial. All right. I do not consider myself a meditation teacher. I don't even consider myself a teacher, but rather a kind of a teller, a guide. I've been there, done that kind of dude, rather than a teacher on a platform. The second thing is that I don't teach meditation at all. What I teach is Dhamma. Did you freeze? You
Yeah, but
froze. Oh,
I can still hear you for some reason.
okay. All right. Your image froze, and I didn't know that you. Yeah, what I said was quite stark. I didn't know if you lost it completely, gone catatonic.
Yeah, break my laptop in two and call it quits.
Yes. So there is that distinction that could say that the Dhamma that I teach uses meditation only as a tool. It's part of the skills that need to be done so that you can get the mind fit for work. That's what meditation is about. Not to go too deep into it. That's why some of those stages of 4, 5, 6, etc. in Chuladasa we don't even bother with. We go straight for the joy, get the mind fit for work, and then we do the hard part, which is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is really what it's all about. And as the student with that bright, shining mind fit for work digs into, develops, understand the nature of suffering, why the Buddha would possibly say the only thing I teach, both formally and now, is suffering and no suffering. That's all I teach. Okay, when we fully understand that, we're beginning to understand this is what the path is really all about, which is the path to the end of suffering, which is the path to dissatisfaction. Literally, it's the path to happiness, but it's a path of skill. Another quality of it is the path of morality. But normally we think of morality or virtue as outside behavior, to where the morality that we're really talking about is in the sense of purity of mind. So that the five precepts are really easy to keep because the mind is pure of the impurities that it would take to put us in the position of breaking the precepts. So it kind of happened naturally. That's the whole idea of the teaching of the Buddha, is natural once we get the mind fit for work. And that mind fit to work, by the way, is the first jhana. And it comes in 2 stages. The first stage is that you get to the point that you say that no matter how obstructed the mind is, at this particular point in time, I can take it out of that particular set of circumstances and create a new set of circumstances. I can be here now. I can, no matter how obstructed the mind is. And that some days students will have an epiphany. One of the kinds of epiphanies was, I had the thought today is really a bad day, and I had that thought 40 or 50 times, and every time I had that thought, I would turn it around and say, no, it's not. I'm going to make this day whatever it wants to be. And by the end of the day, the guy got it. And he says, oh, now I understand, no matter how obstructed the mind is about what a bad day this is, I can stuff that right out, throw it right out, and come back to this present moment over and over and over again. And so it has that real repetitive quality. And that's the difference between the practice that you're doing, which is a formal system with Culadasa, versus the path that we're intending to practice here, is we're developing the skill of sati to over and over and over and over and over again come back to the present moment, keep coming back and keep coming back with joy, coming back with vigor, coming back with the right attitude. And the coming back is the right effort. And the willingness to come back is the right view. And that we need that right view, that it's, a whole lot better to be in the present moment than it is to be stuck in a mind full of suffering. Where the Culadasa method is trying to apply and sustain it as long as you can, and then trying to apply and sustain it as long as you can, and then apply and sustain it as long as you can. That's the method, but it's a different method. Is that the way that you've been trying it, been practicing? Try to keep the mind as concentrated as you could?
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the whole deal of the beginning stages in Culadasa system, that you're trying to develop mindfulness on the one hand, and the other thing is trying to develop stable attention, which goes in the direction of samadhi, I think.
No, so, that is samadhi, or let it say stable attention is in the direction. Okay, so he's changed that reference word. So I use the word apply and sustain. Apply and sustain. And he's using the word in what way?
Come again?
I said, I'm using the word apply and sustain. Apply and sustain. That's 2 Pali. I'm actually using it from the sense of 2 Pali words. And what does Culadasa say? How does he say it?
I think he calls it directed and sustained. So
okay.
directing attention, for example, to the breath at the nose, and then trying to sustain it there, kind of dealing with distractions that would pull you away and not getting distracted.
Okay.
And that is actually what I've been trying to do. Yeah.
All right. Are you willing to try something different than that?
Sure. I hadn't been really aware that there was much of a contradiction there, because you were really emphasizing the coming back part, and since distractions are pretty frequent for me, I had that experience of just coming back over and over during the meditation session or during the day, where like some distraction pulls you away, you realize it, So that's sati, right? You realize suddenly, oh, I'm lost in thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Exactly.
drop that thing, like never mind, start again. That's right effort, and then try to keep it there. That's how I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing it, and I've understood that to be what you were talking about.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we're having this so that we can draw this tiny distinction before we get into the deep stuff. Basically, what we're really looking at, and I don't have anything to complain at all about your sitting practice, but it's the daily life that I think we've already been talking about in the sense of setting a timer so that you come
Yep.
back over and over and over again. And
Yep.
I use the example of how Achan Po would stand outside my kuti. I don't know how long he was there, but when I figured out that he was there, boy, I was Johnny on the spot. Okay. Same idea with the Zen master walking through the time to pay attention. All right. So let that alarm going off not be blase. Imagine that it's your teacher who has just come and he's been waiting on you to figure out that you know he's there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's the way to approach it. Like, is it that when that alarm goes off, this is an important moment. All right, and it's time for me to take a deep, long breath, come back to the present moment, and throw out of the mind whatever was in the mind. And now we're going to start doing something new because that's all it takes for you to drop right into first jhana once you get used to it.
Huh.
That is first jhana. Why? Because you have just thrown out that junk.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're already in first jhana. Now it's fit, now the mind is fit for work. What are we going to do? We're going to watch the body. We're going to watch the hands. We're going to
Yeah.
see what's going on, but we're going to start doing that now in a new frame of reference. And that new frame of reference is the Four Noble Truths. We start wisely paying attention to this is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is what suffering is like when there is no suffering. What is sukha? How can I experience the third jhana? Or not the third jhana, but the third item on the of the Four Noble Truths, the third noble truth. Because you can experience that third noble truth in first jhana. You don't have to
So,
go to any other jhanas.
are you saying that? Oh, okay. So I always thought of jhana as something that takes, like, in a sense, more preparation. That you really need to um, get your stability of attention going as well. And the way you were describing it, it sounds more like a momentary thing where,
Absolutely. Remember, we're practicing the, the natural method. And the more you practice this, the better you'll get at it.
okay, yeah, I've actually been having some good success that I'm really liking with mindfulness throughout the day. Where I don't know what happened, but since the retreat, it's different. There's I mean, my mindfulness on retreat got really good, and since then has decreased. Like I noticed that when the conditions of retreat are not there, like the outcome of retreat is not there, obviously, but something is lingering, and I think also something shifted, where um, previously I kind of thought that a moment of mindfulness was this really special thing where you really pay attention in a like in a special way or something. But now I've realized that it's just this shift in the mind where suddenly you're mindful. Like it just comes up and I don't even need to do anything special. It just comes up and I'm like, oh, this is happening. Like it seems very yeah, it seems very natural. It's not a big deal. It's just this little. It feels like a process in the brain, like coming online by the way, you're doing
I
this.
like that. I like that. Right. It's like coming online. No big deal, but it certainly is a whole lot different than being offline.
Yeah. And I've been having a lot of experiences where throughout the day it just comes up um, on its own. And
That's the intention. That's the development of the skill of sati. That's why we're starting to put those bells in to remind you so that you can start reminding yourself more often. We're developing sati,
yeah,
which is
I
a
think it's
skill
working.
to be here now. Mhm. Yes, it
I think
does.
I think it's been working. Yeah, and
Of
it's
course it
pretty cool
works.
because um, yeah, I've also had the experience that I can um, be more um, be more of an observer instead of getting stuck in things. So I've repeatedly had the experience of, for example, a thought coming up and seeing that it came up on its own, that I didn't make it, I didn't produce it, I didn't create it. And I've had that same experience again with intention as well, where I saw that the intention to do something just appeared without me doing anything about it. I've also had this with moods and emotions, where I would wake up one day and just like come into the realization that I had a really, really bad mood, and for no reason apparently, and then I could just observe it and say, "Oh, there's a really bad mood. Let's kind of just be like a scientist and kind of study it and not be a victim and be really caught up in that."
Good, good. Sounds great. That's exactly the kind of process that you're going through uh, in learning self knowledge. This is the process, and that there's a lion in there someplace. Actually, the lion comes from